Just because when an ASP is approved does not mean there's going to be construction the next day. It's a high level of basically the concept of what's going to be on those lands. Then there's subdivision and or land use bylaw changes, and then subdivision, and then development permits, and then building permits. So this basically allows that process to get going. One of the first things this council did was move this up the priority and to fund the hiring of the position that would create this ASP. And so we saw this as the like I said, one of the best potential solutions that we have to be part of the overall package of solutions in given the numbers. I mentioned those earlier, up to 1,300 units, at least 75% of which will be non-market units, which means they won't appreciate with the market. They will be, basically controlled in their value, just as the CCH, all the other CCH inventory is. As far as timing, I expect that we'll get on with the bylaw amendments soon after the ASP is passed. I know CCH is planning to get into the ground with one of their pieces of land as early as next year. I would expect that you'll see others to follow. They're also going to do the major planning for their portion of the Pallisers land, and the town will be doing its planning around the Mustache lands. And I would expect we'd start to be seeing some more construction around those areas, probably starting in 2025.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. We have a few more questions coming in. Our next question, it seems that it's visitor accommodation being proposed outside of the resorts rather than tourist homes that is really the problem. Why tourist homes and not make sure that visitor accommodation is zoned on less lands?
Well, they're different animals. Visitor accommodation and tourist homes are different animals. Visitor accommodation is more what you would see in traditional hotels. Tourist homes are dwelling units, and the dwelling units, once they're built as tourist homes, even though there's the option for personal use, it's shown that they're, as I said with the previous numbers that I provided, that they're mostly used for tourist homes, and they are in fact rented out. So we don't have them in the residential inventory. So I'd encourage the construction of the visitor accommodation. Tourist homes also have changed over time, just like we often think of Airbnb. Well, Airbnb started so that you could rent out a portion of your house for a portion of the year, and that was originally the discussion in Canmore when tourist homes were allowed. But we're seeing it changed in the market. We're no longer seeing as many just single individuals owning a home and renting out or renting it as part of their own. We're seeing it as a business model in itself, where you have individual or companies buying up a number of units, and then it's their business to rent them out, short-term rental. I don't believe that builds community. I also don't believe that it helps address our housing crisis at all. And so, that is why we're looking at phasing them out.
Thanks for that. Our next question is a follow-up to one of the first questions you answered. Is there no other solution outside of the town of Canmore calling in the $1.7 million CCH loan to be able to keep the existing CCH rentals?
Okay, there hasn't been a calling in of the loan. There was a loan made by the town when the units were purchased. There was a time frame put in, just like on any loan, to have a repayment. As I mentioned, that repayment is something that has to happen so that we can reuse those funds for other housing initiatives. And that for those who are living there, they are provided with multiple options, including extending past the June 2024 if they're unable to find suitable alternative accommodation. And as I mentioned, CCH is actively looking out for these current renters to find them alternative accommodation as openings arise.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krauser. Our next question is, how much responsibility for employee housing lies with the town and how much lies with the employer?
Well, in the purest sense, municipalities actually don't usually have the jurisdiction of housing. That's a provincial jurisdiction. So the fact that we're being so active here is in response to the crisis we have, and you actually see municipalities all over the place needing to step into this void and be involved in the housing sector to a greater extent than they ever have in the past. And of course, when we're talking about this housing, we're not talking about social housing. That is being provided by the province, albeit perhaps more is needed of that as well. But we're talking about housing for our frontline staff, our managers, our professionals, our nurses, our teachers, and so we are stepping into that. Now, as far as the question, employee housing, is it a responsibility of the town or business? I see a role potentially for each. It is a cost of doing business in town, and we do see our businesses stepping up. The town could mandate it, but where we are right now, I think that would be disastrous for many of our businesses. Unlike a town like our neighbors in Banff, where they were a tourist community and had employee housing right from the early days, with the cost of housing as it is now, to mandate it without having other solutions available would put a lot of people in a very difficult situation. So I think the better way to go is that as the town continues to develop housing in conjunction with CCH and other potential partners, that will alleviate the situation. It certainly is open for businesses to potentially be buying some of those or utilizing some of those new construction. But in the interim, I think a lot of businesses are looking at how they can secure housing for their staff so they can attract and retain personnel. So it's in that gray zone. Ultimately, it is a cost and a responsibility for businesses, and the town is trying to assist where we can.
Thank you very much. Our next question: how do you feel about the speed limit on the Trans-Canada Highway through Canmore? The speed limit is 90 kilometers an hour in the national park, which has very few interchanges and good wildlife fencing, then increases to 110 kilometers an hour through Canmore, which has 5 interchanges and very poor wildlife fencing. Is there anything that can be done to reduce the speed limit to 90 kilometers an hour through Canmore?
Okay, so that's a provincial jurisdiction. So in order for that speed limit to change, it would need to be done by the province. There's actually a couple of issues that you brought into play there. The animals and the safety of those roads from animals crossing is actually not directly related to the speed. Studies show that the incidence of conflict actually do not decrease that much going from 110 to 90. You don't see a significant decrease until you get to much lower speeds. So in order to deal with wildlife and the highway, I mean, the best option is fencing. It's very complicated in the Canmore area because of its current development, but we have made a request of the province to assess whether they're able to complete fencing this area, basically from the national park all the way to the river, especially. And they are doing that assessment right now. They have a process they go through, and they're able to, because they prioritize all over the province, where's the next most important and most effective place to have an intervention like that. So that is underway. What reducing the speeds from 110 to 90 actually mostly do, it's about sound. You see a decrease in the sound of traffic, and you know, there's also environmental or climate reasons why you would do that. So I guess my answer is, with respect to wildlife, we're looking at fencing and trying to you know, have a distinct separation between animals and the highway. That, of course, may require some other form of overpass so as to not result in you know, disconnectivity. With regards to changing the speed limit per se, we haven't pursued that just yet, although I know that we've had a little bit of discussion amongst council members because there are some benefits from that reduction as well, but nothing is being actioned in that regard yet.
Thank you very much, Mayor Krausert. Our next question. 300 to 400 tourist commercial residences are planned as part of the TSMV ASPs, and there was considerable tax revenue associated with those units given the quasi-commercial nature of the units. How will the town replace that future revenue?
If there's not tourist homes, well, we're not receiving it yet, so we're not taking a loss there. We've also been talking about how we incentivize other forms of you know, purpose-built rentals, etc. So the hypothetical of into the future, I mean, we're not counting our chickens before they hatch. Let's put it that way. So you know, there will be tax revenue coming in from whatever properties are built. What's the difference between the two? Well, that will very much depend upon a lot of things in the future, and I can't really comment on you know, what's lost of something that we haven't even gained.
Thanks for that. Our next question is, can the town influence the development permit process with a limit on the sizing of homes or by offering incentives to include laneway homes as the preferred development?
Influence, so I'm guessing what is being asked here is, can it be faster for those things that could address our housing crisis? Right now, generally, the town is looking at processes that it can speed up development permits and building permits right across the board. So it's not appropriate this time to suggest that there could be a fast track route, although that is something that I know other municipalities have done, and certainly when we are in a position to evaluate that, I expect it will be one of the things that we can look at. We have seen that you know, we haven't had a lot of great take up when there's been incentives to you know, build you know, an accessory dwelling unit within property. So I mean, if that were to change and there was a great demand, then you know, obviously we need to look at that situation. I guess the short answer is it's possible to have that. It is a very much an operational matter and less of a governance matter, but it is something that we could encourage if the circumstances were appropriate for us to do so. I know that's a gray nothing answer, but that's the best I got on that one.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Our next question is, visitor accommodation zoning allows for nightly rentals. Doesn't have to be a hotel setup per se. Anytime visitor accommodation is a zoning choice, that type of development will always be chosen as it's the most profitable. Why is visitor accommodation not up for review alongside tourist home zoning?
We're not seeing this. It's not dwelling units that are created by visitor comm. It's more of the hotel. There are certain things that they need to have, and my understanding, I mean, they're different animals. We do need visitor accommodation here in Canmore, without a doubt, and we need more of it. And so, I think that we have along Bow Valley Trail appropriate places for, or in Spring Creek, and then up in Three Sisters, appropriate areas where there could be hotel accommodation. And I think that's the direction we should go.
Thanks for that. Lots of questions coming in. That's great to see. Our next one, would council consider amending the land use bylaw to include common amenity housing as a permitted use instead of its current designation as a discretionary use in the land use bylaw?
I think that's a very interesting idea. I think council would be open to considering something like that. That would obviously, when we do updates to bylaws, they typically are written and come through the planning department. Trust me, you don't want what do they call it? Making sausage on the council floor and having these things come, shooting from the hip. But that's definitely something we can look at. It's a relatively new zoning for Canmore. And so I think that's why, starting with the discretionary zoning, but I think we see already at least a couple of cases, as far as I'm aware, on Bow Valley Trail where that's being utilized. And so in the appropriate locations, I would think that that's an interesting thing to consider.
Thank you for that. Our next question, moving on to another topic. What is the status of Canmore gaining resort municipality status similar to resort communities in BC? Currently, the Canmore tax base pays for the infrastructure to support a large temporary tourist population.
Yes. We're no longer calling it resort municipality status. The language of the day is tourist-based communities. We are this is new government. So with the dust settling, we are just now gathering ourselves together to have further discussions with new government, new ministers. I can advise that whereas traditionally it has been Canmore, Banff, and Jasper that have been seeking this, there is also interest in other areas that are clearly on the track of having high visitor numbers, such as Sylvan Lake and Drumheller. And so I've had recent discussions with those mayors. We also see Kananaskis country as an interesting area that they deal with some municipal issues, but not all the same municipal issues. But for those things that they do have to fund, they're in the exact same situation, whereas a very limited population has to pay for something that services a very large visitor population. So you're exactly right. These costs, which a consultant has indicated amounts to about 25% of our budget, relates to tourist-facing infrastructure. And that ranges from, hard infrastructures such as roads, trails, sewer, wastewater treatment, but also things like the number of police officers that we need to have, and the fit and finish of our amenities have to be higher than community our size that doesn't get the visitors in the numbers that we do. So yes, that is being covered by the currently shouldered by Canmore taxpayers, and we are looking for some form of system. We're very open to what that could look like. Our latest ask was that it would be a grant from general revenue, because tourism obviously puts a lot of income into the hands of the province, into general revenue. And so we're asking for a portion of that, a small portion of that, be reinvested back into the community so we can continue to better meet those needs and not have it be on the backs of our taxpayers. So we'll continue to fight, but it's been a long, and I hesitate to use fight, but you know what I mean. We'll continue to persist. It's been a long path, but I do believe that we are getting greater awareness in the government now as to what we're talking about. And we also, with some increased partners, may be able to get somewhere. And as the Premier stated when she was here last Thursday and answered a question on tourist-based communities, she indicated while she's not especially happy with designating certain communities, she certainly understands the issue of having to fund the infrastructure needed for all of these additional visitors. And so she's certainly open to having that conversation as to what that could look like.
Thank you for that. Our next question: is there presently a program available where homeowners can access loans for accessory dwelling units?
Excellent question. I know that CCH had one, and it was not, as I mentioned, not subscribed very well. But last I heard is that it was going to be looked at again. I would have to defer to CCH to determine if they in fact have anything that's active right now. I can't think of that at the top of my mind, but it is something that we have talked about recently, and it was talked about favorably trying it again.
Great. Our next question: how does the town engage local industry to talk about how these types of zoning changes translate in real life?
These types of zoning changes. There's several different layers to that question. If we're talking about Palliser ASP, we're talking about mostly town and CCH owned lands. And so, and we're not looking to sell those lands to private developers. We're looking to, as we have been advised by many developers, whatever land you can have yourself, keep it and develop it. So most of those changes all relate to what the town and CCH would like to see happen on those lands. In the broader picture, BOTA is very active in providing advice on any changes that come forward. And typically there's commentary that they provide, and then there's some sort of communication that goes back with the town. And of course, even without that engagement, every time you do land use changes, they require a public hearing. And so that's an opportunity for people to provide their feedback. We are always looking at ways that we can improve communication and input and various publication. And I think that we are we're going to be getting better at doing these things. We can always improve, and I hope that you will, whoever asks this question, will see that happening.
Thank you for that. Got a lot of questions coming in, so just sifting through them here. Our next one: if the initiative of phasing out tourist homes go through, would the town consider grandfathering current tourist homes to continue to operate as is without the stipulation of having it revert to residential use if the use ceases for 6 months, as this may prevent an owner from turning their home into a long-term rental unit for a period of time and forever operate it as a short-term rental to keep the tourist home status?
As I mentioned, grandfathering is very much on the table. What that grandfathering looks like, you're going to have to wait and see what the recommendations are. I can't tell you what they are until the discussion's been had.
Thanks for that. Our next question is a follow-up to an earlier one around tourist home zoning in the Three Sisters area. Mayor Krausert, how will the town reconcile the desire to explore eliminating tourist home zoning with the LPRT decision that supports tourist home designation in TSMB, particularly in the village ASP? Is there an opportunity to discuss this given the recent court decision?
You know, we are so far away from being able to answer that question. As far as I know, I mean, the court decision told us we are to accept the ASPs as submitted, and so that's what will happen. And as far as how that impacts tourist homes there, we need to look into that, and that's going to be a subject of discussion. Anything that is a recommendation out of the livability task force is not necessarily going to be taken, you know, as is. It's going to be a recommendation, but then there will also have to be analysis, legal analysis. We'll have to look at the planning implications, etc. And then it will come to council having been vetted with that. I know that that's a big question, and I honestly don't know where that's going to land. All I know is that we have to make sure that we are following the orders that were made, that we are respecting the rights of the landowners, while at all times working towards what we believe are in the best interests of the community, and finding a way that all of those things can be satisfied together. So that's the long answer. The short answer is stay tuned, because that's a bigger question than I can deal with today, and certainly do not have an answer for it.
Thank you for that. We have a couple more questions left. The next one, what is the status of the Silvertip gondola development proposal? Canmore Council has declared a climate emergency, and another gondola in the Bow Valley with all the concrete and CO2 emissions from operating the gondola seems contrary to the climate emergency.
Well, the process is going to be governed by the provincial process, which I believe is an NRCB process, as well as an Indigenous consultation process. Now, that said, and so where are we with that? I think that those processes, last time I heard, it was going to take at least a couple of years, and that was going to be optimistic. So I'm thinking that we're probably still in that same boat. That's a question for Stone Creek Properties. The town is really pretty much in an observer role right now as far as the process goes. However, with respect to gondolas, I mean, you mentioned the question mentioned a couple of potential setback or costs of something like that. However, what I've heard about gondolas is that actually they become net energy positive in their operation, because they actually end up generating electricity, and they're able to capture that. And also, I think one of the best things about a potential gondola is it keeps people out of the corridor. And so, you know, it takes them up over the corridor, and it also, you know, is not something that is unfamiliar for a mountain landscape. So, you know, I think that there's lots of potential cost benefits. It's being assessed by the province through their process and through Indigenous consultation, of which the town has no say or control.
Thank you for that. We're getting down to our last 5 minutes here, so we'll try to get to our last couple questions. The next one, in Austrian mountain villages, ownership of a second home is quite restricted, usually only 5 to 15% of homes in the town. People who are not residents can purchase fully managed homes where the owner can stay in the home 5 or 6 weeks a year, and the remainder of the time the home is rented out. Has anything similar to these options been considered?
Well, you're talking about very different land use systems. Even in Canada, it's tough to speak conclusively as far as the rules that are existent between, let's say, BC and Alberta when you start to look elsewhere. So my first thought with that is I don't even know if we have the power to do something like that. Limiting who can own would seem to me quite adverse to our current system. So I would think that it wouldn't necessarily apply. In those particular municipalities too, I'm not even sure of the legal structure for municipalities in Austria. I don't know if they have any constitutional standing, where they get their powers from. In Canada, municipalities are not recognized constitutionally. They are creatures and creations of the province. And so each province sets the rules for the municipalities, what they can and cannot do. And we're a very, very different system, I would think, than there. So here I'm rambling because I actually haven't given much thought to that before, although I read that article. And so my response is it's likely not possible here. In fact, I really doubt it. But if anybody wants to provide me any information to show how something like that could work in Alberta, I'd love to take a look at it, just for information purposes, if nothing else.
Thanks for that. Our next question, given the recent court decision, is there an opportunity to sit down with TSMV to see how the town can leverage the housing incentives in the TSMV ASPs by working together?
Well, let's take a look at where we are in the process. So there is no opportunity to talk about what's currently in the ASPs. We've been ordered to approve them as submitted to the town. And so that's what we will do. As I mentioned earlier, with the process with ASPs is then you go to the next levels of detail. I understand with the Three Sisters, they'll actually go to a conceptual scheme, which then helps inform, even further, and then there'll be bylaws and subdivisions, and all of that stuff have to happen before there's any development. There are density bonusing in there, so that's something that a private landowner can take advantage of. And I think that the way that Three Sisters has typically developed before is I think, and don't quote me on this, but they typically will service, do some subdivision service piece of land, sell off chunks of land to other developers to, might want to develop a neighborhood or a particular complex or whatnot. And then they really decide based on the rules what they're going to build. I suppose that along the way, and as markets shift and time goes, and there will be several discussions along the way as to, how any development can best meet the needs of the community. But it is a matter of discussion as opposed to, us. We can't change the rules, and we can't change the order that has been made. So we have to work within those parameters.
Thanks for that, Mayor Krausert. We are down to our last minute or so, and I don't think we're going to get to all of the questions we have, but is there any last words you wanted to leave everyone with today?
Well, I appreciate the interest, and I hope that everybody will recognize, for the most part, except for a couple of questions that were sent in advance, I'm just opening myself up to answering questions that come out. I really appreciate the respectful nature of them. I hope that you will understand that I won't always have the information available, but I do my best to answer, and I hopefully state it when I can't. It's a continuing conversation within our community. People can send questions to me at or council@canmore.ca, and that's probably the best way to go. And that way, other councillors can see the questions as well, or send it directly to me at sean.krausert@canmore.ca. And I'm also open to grabbing coffee. And this whole process is about finding different ways to be accessible and to have these conversations. And so I thank everyone for being here today, and let's continue the conversations as we can.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mayor Krausert, and thanks to everyone for your time and joining us tonight. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.